Okay, my name is Mike Smith. Today is October 11th, 2023. I'm here in Auburn, Alabama with Reverend Dowdell. And Reverend Dowdell, just before we get started, do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
Yes, sir. And could I have you state your full name?
Okay, my name is Arthur Lewis Dowdell Sr., better known as Bishop A.L. Dowdell, here in Auburn, Alabama.
Okay, yes, thank you, sir. And could you also give us your age and your date of birth?
I was born September 24th, 1954. I was just turned 69 years old. I don't look like it, but
You
I
do
did.
not.
Yeah. I was born in Auburn, Alabama, and over on what we call the backline, West Glen, by a midwife over at that. And then at 2.5 years old, my father hauled us off to Detroit, Michigan. I was 2.5 years old. And my sister, which is deceased now, Martha Dowdell, was 6 months old.
Okay, and that was 2.5 and 6 months old.
I was 2.5 years old, and my sister was 6 months old.
Okay, awesome. And you were born here in Auburn.
I was born here in Auburn at what they call West Glen, but we used to call it the backline. All of the backline was owned by all of the blacks then
Okay.
on West Glen, and that's where I was born.
Okay, yes, sir. And your mom and dad.
My mom and dad, my mom was Ellen Taylor Dowdell. She was born in 1931. My father was a few years younger. He was born in 1933. And they married in 1954 when I was born.
And were they both from here in Auburn?
My father was from Losapoka, Alabama. And his name were Oscar Lewis Dowdell. And my mother's name, like I said, was Ellen, E-L-L-E-N, T, which is Taylor, before she married Dowdell.
And was she from Auburn?
She was born in Auburn,
Okay.
Alabama.
Okay. And you have your sister.
Yeah, my sister was not my oldest sister. I had another brother. His name was Larry Taylor. Then I had another sister which was older than me. My brother was 4 years older than me. My sister were 3 years older than me. And they all was born in Tuskegee, Alabama.
In Tuskegee. Okay. And before we move on to like when you went to Detroit, your mom and dad grew up here around the Auburn, Opelika, and Lochapoka area.
That is correct.
Do you recall what they did for work around the area?
My mother, she went to school at the old school at that time, and I think that was Lee County Trading School where she, I think she graduated from there. My father also went to that same school where he graduated, and history would show that he was one of the probably best baseball players that were there, and I think history would show that his name, he was a good baseball player. I don't know what base he played, but the street committee says that he's one of the probably best baseball players, and could have probably went to professional baseball.
Wow.
But I think after he got up and his grandmother, they owned a farm, the Slaughter and Dowdell farm in Losapoka.
And you said the Slaughter and Dowdell farm in Lochapoka.
That's correct.
That was run by your grandparents.
That was run by my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather, Oscar Dowdell, and Oline Slaughter Dowdell.
Okay. And you mentioned before we started the interview that this farm was very successful.
It was very successful. They grew cotton, they grew corn, they had cows, they had pigs, And us being like in the city, we wasn't used to going and beating on these hogs and stuff. But we used to go down and really enjoyed seeing all these pigs and chickens and hogs and cotton. And she had acres. I think she had something like 56 acres divided among her and her brothers.
Very successful, and this was in the
From 1900s. She was born in in the 1800s.
Okay.
But I think it was back. Let me turn this on.
It's okay.
It just jumps on by itself, and I know you're recording.
Oh, it's okay. That is quite all right.
We work this thing so much, and it comes on and go off when they get ready. But they was very successful, and the records would show that.
Yes.
If you ever, I'm sure, because everyone knows that the Dowdells and the Slaughters was very successful people at that time. Probably some of the most successful. I'm not being facetious when I say blacks at that time. They was between wealthy and.
And this was the early 1900s, so pre-World War II.
Yeah,
they were.
My grandfather was in World War.
Okay.
My grandfather went in the army. He was in World War One or Two. My father was in the Korean War, and I went in the army during the Vietnam War. My son went in the army after I went in. My daughter went in the army after he did. So we basically we know something about being in the army. We was real proud of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's a lineage of military service
Yeah.
within the family. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing.
The
that.
graveyard would say so. If you go down Littlesboro graveyard and you see all the Dowdells, you'll see that they got my father, a Korean, his headstone, and my grandfather, Oscar Dowdell. Right on the front row, you'll see Olin and Oscar Dowdell. He was in World War One or Two. So they proudly served
Yes.
in the army, and I did too. And all of us did not get out without honorable discharges.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, once again, congratulations
Thank
on
you,
that.
sir.
I know during those, especially times of conflict, that was probably very,
Yeah.
trying times for you. You had mentioned that your grandfather and grandmother were very successful, especially during this time of great discrimination,
Yeah.
one could say, as being, black in Lochapoka, Alabama. Can you maybe recall and maybe, tell us a little about their success and maybe what they've done for the community?
Well, my grandmother, she grew cotton, and she would hire other blacks. In fact, my mother went and picked cotton in her fields. And my brothers, who was older than I was, and my mother, that was her daughter-in-law, but my brother enjoyed going and picking the cotton. Now, I tried, but being my grandmother, she just didn't want me to go, and I could not stand the heat as much as my brother could. He was a little older, but that was my grandmother's farm, and I would go out. It was just amazing to know that she would hire all these people, and then were able to pay them and I think they were getting 100 pounds, whatever the 100 pounds was, she was paying them, and my grandfather was too. So not only were they paying for cotton, they were selling chickens and all these things to the community. They was a great asset to the community in Lochapoka.
Would it be fair to say that they were probably a very contributing memory of the Lochapoka community?
I think you could say that because when Walter Slaughter gave us the school, my grandmother's brother, the land, I would think that they was really could afford to do that, and he gave the first portion of land to the Lochapoka High School. The school should have been Walter Slaughter High School, but they chose to name it Lochapoka. But the record will show, if you go to the courthouse, that it was in the Slaughter's clan grips. They owned the land.
And you mentioned earlier that your grandmother was mixed race.
She was Indian. She was half Indian. I was told she looked like it. You seen the pictures?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was told she was Cherokee, half Cherokee, and half black.
Half Cherokee and half black. descent. Yeah, I just wanted to make note of that.
Right.
because-
You look at me and you can tell. Look, my nose structure. You know, the Indians has a unique facial makeup, high cheekbones, and
Yes, sir.
all of that. My grandmother had all those attributes.
Yes, sir. And during this time period, the early 1900s and early 20th century, it was a very segregated time. I just you mentioned that earlier, and I just wanted to kind of make note of that. As that may exacerbated some of the segregation.
I think when my grandmother went up and grandfather went up to sell their cotton and sell their vegetables, I don't think that they was treated equal to whites. I think, and it was proven that black farmers did not get their fair share of the money that they should have gotten when they sold sharecropping and all of these things. They never could ever get out of paying off their debt.
Yes,
But somehow or another that my grandmother's father did.
yes, sir. And they were able to give land to build what is now known as the Lochapoka High School.
Exactly right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's great. Maybe if we can loop back around really quick to your childhood. You were born in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
You lived in Auburn, what is now East Glen, but used to be...
It's West Glen now.
West
It's still.
Glen.
I was born on West Glen. It's still West Glen.
Yes, sir.
It has, and I was born there. I went to school, graduated from Auburn High School. Went back to Detroit after I came to, I got married early. I married the first time as a child. My father had to come here from Detroit and sign for me to get married. And that was one of the worst things I could have ever done, marrying for all the wrong reasons. But I did do so. Bill Ham and all of us was in, you probably know the mayor used to be, all of us in school together. We was kids in school together and never thought that probably we would be serving on the city council together. Mm-hmm. But after I went in the Army and you seen that I came out with honors, Dr. E.D. Porter, he was a well-known preacher here in Auburn. He decided to take me to the city council. I was young after I had gotten married. The second time he took me. And that's when all this history with me started. He taught me how to be a politician. He told me the ropes. And we began to set out, when I came back home from Detroit, look and see that we did not have a predominantly black district in Auburn. And I fought to get it changed. Mayor Dempsey was on the city council. At that point, we had Ward 1, Place 1, and Place 2. We had Ward 2, Place 1, and Place 2. We had 4 wards, but they had 8 places.
Wow.
And that was archaic to me, because when you look at it, you could vote twice in one ward, but the 2 places. So the trick was that if you live across town and you voted in Ward and Place 1, you still could vote in Place 2 to decide who was going to be the city council persons for Ward 1. So when we seen it, we said, no, that can't be.
And what year was this, do you think?
1994.
1994.
It's when I came on the city council. Sam Harris was on the city council before I was. And if you check the records, you probably know this. Mary Brooks and Lindbergh Jackson was on before Sam Harris. That then was the only ward that had 5 city council persons, 2 blacks and 3 whites, which means it kind of balanced it out. Mm-hmm. Somehow or another, after Lindbergh Jackson and Mary Brooks came off the city council and Sam Harris came, then it came in this little small city where we got 8 councilmen in a city that is not even metropolitan. So my thing is, why do we have 8 city councilmen in a city, and if you delete the students or you dissipate the students, you got how many residents in Auburn?
Even less, right?
Even less. The university makes up something like 36,000 students. If you abstract 36,000 students, which now they got this system where if they voting at home, now we got such a smart system that you can't vote here. Immediately, if you come in and you try to vote, they say, no, you voting in Beulah. I'm just using that, Alabama. So if we still using the students in our census, and we saying they're part of our community, and in reality they're not, why is it that we only have 1 black city councilman on the city council with 8 wards, not a Supreme Court? Now we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me let you ask the question. I don't want to get ahead
No,
of you.
this is quite all right.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I capture holistically, your story, and I know we jumped ahead quite a bit to 1994 to City Council, and
Let's go back.
It's very intriguing.
Okay.
You moved to Detroit at 2.5, but when did you come back to?
When I was right before I turned 6.
Okay, so only a 4-year
Yeah.
ish.
Then my mother came back on the train.
Okay.
We came back to that old depot. You see up there, that train depot.
Yes, yeah.
That's the original train depot.
Okay.
My mother, we got on the train and we came back, and I got off that depot, and we went back to West Glen. Back there, then you had Mr. Perry. He was the cab driver. Mr. Stubbs, and that store that you see now they call Corner Market.
Mm-hmm.
That used to be Stubbs service station there.
Okay.
So when we came back at the age of, before I turned 6, I stayed until I turned 15, and I went back to Detroit during the summer.
So you lived here from the age of 6 to the age of 15.
Mm-hmm. Then I went back to Detroit and stayed during the summer, and then come back during the winter for school. I would still go back in the summer sometime. Once I came down south, I really didn't like too much going back to Detroit because it was cold, but I did go back. And after I got older, but we'll talk about that when we get to that point.
During your teenage years, when you would go from Auburn to Detroit in the summertime and then come back to Auburn, did you notice a difference in the social, in the culture, I know we talked about the temperature and the geographic location. We understand there's a difference, but what was the differences like then, being in Detroit, Michigan, and then also being in Auburn, Alabama?
I think the racial tensions are different. When I was in Detroit, it seemed that whites and blacks got along better than the southern whites in Alabama. I remember vaguely that my grandmother went uptown, and I always wondered why. And I remember coming into town, and there was 2 different bathrooms. Vaguely can remember that it said white only and blacks. So I always wondered, why did I have to use a different bathroom only because of the color of my skin? And I said one day that I was going to grow up, I wanted to change that. I didn't want to be, my grandmother grew up saying, and then I grew up hearing her saying to sometimes white kids, yes ma'am, and no ma'am. And I'm saying, why should that be? Why should my grandmother, at the age of 50 maybe, say yes ma'am to a child that was 18, 19, or even younger years old?
And that was here in Alabama.
That was here in Auburn, Alabama.
Yes, sir.
But you was talking about my mother. Go ahead. You wanted to know about her.
Yeah, it'd be good. No,
Now my mother, she worked for Young's Laundry.
Okay.
my mother was a very beautiful, dark-skinned woman. She was, and the history, the people around here say your mother was one of the most beautiful, dark-skinned women in Auburn. She was a very attractive woman. I'll show you a picture. She worked for Young's Laundry for many years. The lawyer Young up there, she still has a lawyer's office, and where the laundromat used to be.
Okay.
That's where my mother worked at. Until finally she started working for the fraternity house, cooking in the kitchens with a high school education.
Okay.
And it seems to me back there then, I wondered, it didn't matter whether you had a college degree or a high school degree. If you were black in Alabama, to me, you was held back. And I always wondered, but I knew that I was going to get older. I was growing up. I wanted to be able to channel some of these things that I seen that my parents had to go through. We was young and playing on the back line and playing on those dirt roads. I realized that our dirt roads was the last one to get paved. Finally, it did get paved, but we was afraid of the police. Police to us was a threat because we felt intimidated. And the reason that we felt intimidated because there was no black police officers at the time until Slim Lockhart and John Dunn became two of the first black police in Auburn. But that's all we knew was fear. But when I went to Detroit, it was different. But down south, it has changed now, but it was, when we was coming up, different.
Did you ever witness firsthand any police brutality towards the black community? Or is there anything, you had this fear and it came from a place that made you feel like this? Can you recall specifically one instance or any way that shaped this fear?
I remember I think we was at the Stubbs service station and the police, somebody threw a rock. And the police turned around and we was running and I was a kid and I ran by this pole and I got a deep scar on my back where I cut myself. We were running because those police, if they had caught us, we believed that they either would have beat us or killed us. And we were kids. And we actually were running for our lives. And those police came through those woods and they were looking for us just like we had committed a major crime. But we made ourselves home and we felt safe at home to our parents. But they couldn't prove who we was. We were safe.
Yes, sir. Thank you for sharing that. Your high school years, you said you went to high school here in Auburn,
Mm-hmm.
and then during the summertime you would go up to visit Detroit. What high school did you attend here?
Auburn High School. The first school we attended was Lee County Trading School over on the back line. Where Martin Luther King Park was, that's where the school was. They built Borkin Street. Then we went, it was segregated school, went to Borkin Street. And went to Borkin Street, all blacks, no whites. Finally, school was integrated. We was not the first ones to go to integrated schools. We went to Drake High School. It's the middle school now. Mm-hmm. But that's where we went. And finally, you got Arthur James Dowdell and several of my brothers, they was the first to go to Auburn High School. We wasn't the first group to go. But finally, we all went to Auburn High School and we was able to mix with the white kids, and that was one of the most fearful things to me. Because we thought, since we watched the TVs and seen how they integrated the schools and how blacks was beaten, and we was afraid that was going to happen to us. But luckily enough, it didn't happen to us when we got to Auburn High School.
when you were getting ready to integrate with the school systems, you came from Drake School and you were going to go to Auburn High School. Was it a choice? Did you have a choice then, or was it we are integrating?
We are integrating. You don't have a choice.
Did your brother and some of his peers, did they have choices?
They didn't have a choice. None of us had a choice in
Okay, so this
integration.
is a little bit after the choice
Right.
came around.
You didn't have a choice. You had to go. They said that the schools integrated and we had to go. We was taken from our schools that we actually loved. The parks changed. Our recreation changed. Our swimming pools that we had at Drake High School changed. And we thought that maybe it would change for the better, but it looked like it changed in our community for the worse. We could no longer swim at Drake High School anymore. We had to go downtown to Sanford High School. We could no longer play football, baseball anymore on that field. Because once they integrated and white kids started coming to our school, everything began to change in our school. And it seems to me that it made it better for the predominantly white schools. And our school was depleted, always have been. But then when integration came, it only made it better because all of us was integrated. But then the recreational, the things that we had in our community, all dissipated. All was eradicated. And we still to this day, we don't have those things in our community anymore.
With the integration of the high schools, you personally kind of felt like it made things harder for you to do the things that you normally did. So your everyday, whether it's recreational activities, or just getting around and being able to do things. What used to be at Drake, now you had to travel further distances to get there.
We had to travel further distances to get there, and if you did not have sufficient transportation, your dream of getting there did not happen. But when we was at Drake and our swimming pool was there, and our ball game parks was there, we had a joy to be able to go there, and we wonder why could not they shut down Sanford pool and let the whites come to our pool when it seems like they had more opportunities and advantages than we had. We didn't have the vehicles to travel like they did. So we felt somewhat set back when everybody was saying that it was progress. But in this community, we felt like it was a setback. And they still feel somewhat like that in 2023.
Can you expand on that just a little bit?
And the reason why they feel like that, what do we have? If you look, Moulton, when I was on the city council, we'll talk about that. Let's get to that later.
Okay.
But the reason why they felt like that, we feel like that is because it's not there. The only thing that is there is memory. Memory is good. But this did not have to happen. And it did. Our old people used to come on Saturdays and sit out under their shade trees with their chairs and watch us play softball, and hundreds of people would come and park and sit on their cars and root for their teams, and it seemed so good. We were able to come together. There was not the crime that you seen because they had something to do. And when we had our little recreational center over there on across the street from Drake, we were able to have our little parties and do our things that people could walk. It was fun. But after integration came, now integration is good, but it was not good for us because what happened to our community, it was not built up, it was depleted. The activities and the houses that we had
Do you feel that this was intentional?
I know it was. We know that it was intentional. I'm trying to find the words to say. But it was planned. And that plan was not a good plan for us. And you know what it does to me? It brings, being a bishop and a pastor and a Christian and a civil rights activist, it brings all of the rage. It's good rage that is in me. To say that a change must come. And it must come before Jesus comes. So we're looking for that change to be. And it must be, and then the separatism. See, what we believe that the white community learned to do is bring separatism among us. And if we're separate, and if we separate ourselves, and we got division among ourselves, we can never get anything done. But when we come together, not just as a black community, but as a right-thinking community, white and blacks, and that we can see that there's something wrong across the tracks right now. What's going on? Why is it that all of these, everybody seems to be prosperous? And it takes 5 years to build a community for the blacks. And if you look across the street, it doesn't take but a whole year, and you got a whole community. Something is amiss.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any of these, you talked about the emotions that you recall just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. It triggers some of these emotions. Were these emotions what led you to be after high school? Are they kind of what led you to become active in organizations such as the NAACP, or to follow your profession as a minister, as a pastor here in Alabama? Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that influenced your career path?
Dr. E.D. Porter was, and you can look him up, he brought me into politics because I was very outspoken. So when I came back home from Detroit, I left and got a divorce. My life was just, I studied the ministry in Hawaii under Dr. Bill Bright's ministry. You probably heard of him. Dr. Bill Bright, one of the, Dr. Ice Perman. They had good teachers at the University of Hawaii. And we went from the Army over there, and I really learned about evangelism and about Christ. It prepared me. So when I came home, I took evangelism that I learned, and I said, this will work for politics also. So when we got involved with politics, I came home from Detroit after I went back. I was grown then. I went back at 22 or 23. I went back and stayed. My father got a house. My sister came, and my mother got ill. I came back. So I began to look at the city council. And when I went and got all the documents, I said, wait, something is wrong with this. We don't have a predominantly black district in Auburn. And then it's chronicle. When you look at it, the things that they was doing was manipulative. You got a black in a district that the majority of the whites can decide whether you're going to be in that district or not, because they can vote twice. They can vote for the one that in their community, that's the place. That's the legality of it. Trick. And then they can vote for me that I didn't even live in your community, but plays Ward 1, plays 1 and 2, saying that you could do that. So what I did, I came home and I got with Mayor Dempsey, and we said, this is archaic and need to change. And she agreed, and we went down to Montgomery to the what we call the SELC, Southern Christian SELC, Southern Christian Leadership, ADC. So we went to Joe Reed and Jerome Gray. The mayor and myself went and we said, draw these lines. And he drew them for the first time. We had almost a black district. So they didn't want to change it. So what we did, we said Ward 1 will be cut. We will eliminate the people that live in place 1 and only place 2 could vote for the one in place 2. And guess what? I won the city council. They could not stop it. So the next following 4 years, they changed it. In 2000, and 1994, we had the first single black member to win in a single black. This was me. Sam Harris ran against Logan Gray. Guess who won? Logan Gray beat him. And I told Sam Harris, I said, they're not going to vote for you. Yeah, they're going to vote for me. He lost the election. I won. Logan Gray won. Then what they did in the next 4 years, what we got? Single member districts. Everybody does. So we got the 8 single member districts. But I won for the last 16 years. I won every time. Beat everybody. So we look and say, wait a minute, this district is not predominantly black, and it's not predominantly black now. Blacks cannot vote and get a candidate of choice without the whites saying, we can mess with you if we want to. If you speak out too much, we can actually undercover vote enough so you can't win. So here we are. I ran the city council, and won every time. But then when we got the district that's not predominantly black anymore, here's somebody come in the district that was not even in the community. And I don't know whether you've been here long enough to know that Clement Bird ran against me.
Okay.
He said he lived in Auburn, but he didn't realize he was trying to use my aunt's address for his, and I didn't tell him. He tried to use my aunt's address for his residence. And finally I came and I said, you saying that you live in this house? He said, yeah, I live here. I said, that's my mama's sister's house. So I called my cousin and I said, why would you let Clement Bird do this? He said he wanted to say that he lived there, but the election was rigged. And they say he won. I didn't fight it. Let it be. Because I do know this, you reap what you sow. Now my sister-in-law, ex-sister-in-law, I helped her to win and she won. Connie Taylor is my brother's ex-wife. So, you know, she wearing my mother's maiden name. Mm-hmm. So that's the story. But then if you look at it, there's no, arguably, there's no black ever fought as much as I had in Lee County. You can look it up and see. Then I became president of the vice president of the NAACP.
What year was that?
1981, before the city council. Reverend Jennings became the president in 1981.
So you were the VP,
and I was the vice president.
Vice president to Reverend Jennings when he
to
was
Reverend
president.
Jennings when he was president. And then I became the president of the Ministerial Alliance, the youngest president to serve. And then I was the secretary for the ADC. Reverend Bannon was the president. John Harris was the vice president.
When you ran for the vice president nomination, the NAACP, was it like a election?
People voted. They voted. Whoever got the majority of the vote, yes. Like Reverend Jennings got the majority of the vote, and then they vote for vice president. You get the majority of the vote.
Were you an active member? When did you become an active member before this 1981 mark? Do you recall about how long or about what year it was? Maybe when you became a member of the NAACP?
I became pastor of Friendship Missionary Baptist Church in 1985. that's when I was got really involved into a change coming to Opelika and Auburn. Reverend Bandy was not preaching at the time, but he started preaching. He went off to Morehouse.
Mm-hmm.
I was still in college at Opelika Technical College at the time, which is Southern Union now. When he graduated, he came back. And all of us, that's when we really got involved with the ADC and the NAACP.
Okay.
So we got involved in it, and with the NAACP and the ADC, they got a lawsuit going to file against Opelika first. And once they filed with the federal, with with the Justice Department, that's when Opelika changed.
What was this lawsuit on specifically? Do you recall?
I think it was on the city council changing to have 2 wards in Opelika,
Okay.
and also I think they rezoned the Auburn. They rezoned the they drew lines for the county commission. Brandy, they drew, county commission also. Then we keyed in on Auburn. That Auburn would change, and Jerome Gray drew the lines for Opelika. The ADC, he drew the line for Opelika. He drew the lines for Auburn.
And this was before you were city councilman.
Before I was city councilman, before I became city councilman, they drew the lines.
Yes.
So I could run and win.
Gotcha.
And I did win. And I served for almost 20 years on the city council, 16.
Yes, sir. This 1981, when you were the vice president of the NAACP, how long did you sit in
1
that
year.
position? 1 year.
I really wasn't interested at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was young. Basically,
Was the NAACP very active
it was.
During this time
The
period?
NAACP was very powerful then.
Okay.
It had muscle. The NAACP is a paper tiger now, and I know we're recording, but I'm just telling the truth.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
They don't have no power.
Okay.
Nobody's afraid of the NAACP in Lee County anymore, because the main players are not there. Reverend Bandy, myself, John Andrew Harris, Oscar Penn has gotten older. Irene was my cousin, Dowdell.
Mm-hmm.
You interview her?
No, I did not. No, sir.
Okay, that's my cousin. She served as president. And for many years, the NAACP has lost its standard, its influence.
And you contribute that to the main people?
The people that's running it.
Okay.
You see, Auburn only fears people that can speak and got a voice to speak. And if you notice, if you go on my page, and you can follow the history, you got to know what to say and you got to pick your battles. Mostly every battle that we fought, we won. For one thing, I believe that I'm a Christian and the Lord is with me when I go. I moved the flag out of the cemetery. Did you know about that?
Yes.
I moved. I didn't know you.
About that.
Yeah, I moved the Confederate flag out of the cemetery.
What year was this?
2000. I think it was 2010 or something. It's on the internet now.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what happened was I taking my daughter to school, and something just told me to go in the cemetery.
What cemetery?
Over by Sanford, the old. You know where that cemetery is?
Yes, sir. I know what you're talking
That
about.
old cemetery, and I went in, and what I seen, I couldn't believe it. They had Confederate flags everywhere. And the people that was there, I said, I was on the city council then, Who told y'all to put these flags in a public cemetery? And they said, we've been doing this for years. I said, the law says that me as a sworn elected official took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And there's a phrase that says, anything offensive to any group or people on public soil must be moved. And I grabbed them and I moved them.
Who was
And
putting
threw-
them out? I'm sorry.
And I threw them in my car. The Daughters of the Confederacy were there. And when I threw them in my car, I seen someone, I was at McDonald's, I seen someone that was in the press. I said, I took some flags out of the cemetery. He said, where? I said, old cemetery over there. I said, they had flags over there. And I said, I took them out as a sworn officer to uphold the Constitution. I said, I had to take them out because black folk pay taxes in Auburn also. I said, those flags that was down in the soil on taxpayers' ground is offensive to black people. When they go in there, they see this flag. The only thing we think about, they raped our women, they hung our men, they took our land, they burned our houses. We don't think about no Daughters of Confederacy, what they stand for. He said, you really got the flags? I said, yes. So I opened them up. And he took a picture of them and put it in the front page. The next morning I woke up, councilman moved flags. And people came from all over the country. We made news all the way out in California when I took those flags. So the Daughters of the Confederacy came against me. Then the Ku Klux Klansmen came down here. You didn't know that they marked in the streets?
You can look. I don't know any of this history, and my apologies, but
yeah, they marched in the streets here. I took those flags out of the cemetery, and they came against us. They said they were going to bomb our houses. My children, they threatened us just like they doing over there with Israel. They did that same thing with us like terriers. But we made it through it. It was so bad until when they came down to the city council and filled the city council up with Klansmen, and they marched out in front of the city council because I took those flags out of the cemetery.
Here in Auburn.
Here in Auburn.
In 2010.
2010. And maybe between 10 and 15, I know. You look it up, you'll see.
Yes.
I can pull my flag up right now, and you'll see me. We're holding those flags that I pulled them out. So they came against me and swore that I was not going to win no more. I won 2 more times after that. But they threatened my wife. We've been married a long time too, but they threatened to do everything to us. But we still stood because those flags was wrong in the cemetery.
Yeah. Immediately after this broke, you pulled the flags from the cemetery. You said the Daughters of the Confederacy came after you.
The Daughters of the Ku Klux Klansmen, the Daughters of the Confederacy, they claim like they're not associated with the Klansmen, but yes, they are. They're brothers and their fathers and their whoever it was. They marched in the Confederate Army. Robert E. Lee, we celebrated him when we was in high school and didn't know that he had slaves. He was a racist, and yet Lee County is named after him. And a lot of things that went on with Robert E. Lee when we was taught in school, we was taught that he was a hero. He was a racist and a murderer. That's what he was, and that's what he is. So we have to. Fort Benny was named Fort Benny for the longest. We didn't know it was a racist general's name.
Yes, sir.
Now it's done changed.
Now it's changed.
Fort
Yes.
Moore.
Fort Moore, yes, sir.
So there's so many things, and then we got unfinished business in Auburn. I constantly, I'm not happy with what I see in Auburn. I'm not happy with what I see. And then I served as the president of the SELC.
You served as the president
of the SELC. In fact, I'm still the unofficial president of the SELC now.
What years did you serve as the president of the SELC?
Last 2 years ago. It's just recently.
Recently.
The national president came down here. In fact, I'm in their national magazines that goes all across the country. I can show you pictures of me in those magazines.
I really find it intriguing, the 2010 or to 2015, the Confederate flag, you removing them, and the daughters of the Confederacy, the Ku Klux Klan at that point in time made threats against you. They marched in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in time, the NAACP, what?
Nothing.
Was there any actions going on then? With that?
Nothing.
And why do you think? Can you tell me a little bit about the nothing, I guess?
Well, I feel like you gotta have people with courageousness, and you gotta. There's some fish does not swim downstream. There's some fish you wonder why they leap up. It's strange, but they go against the current. A true leader that's called by God gotta go against the current. And sometime in going against the current, you're gonna make currents. You're gonna make black and whites mad.
Yes.
So you gotta have that kind of leader.
Did you have any national support or anything to you at that time? You said you made news and
Joseph Lowry, you remember him?
Yes, sir.
They know me. Do you know Dr. He's the president of the SELC now. What's his name?
They were coming down in support, or they offered support during this time period?
Drew McPhillips, prominent lawyer. He volunteered. We good friends. He volunteered to be the lawyer for me. The whole community was on my side.
Yes, sir.
The black community. So
not a white community. You didn't have a lot of white.
Not a lot of whites because they thought it was right for them to have them flags in the cemetery, and I thought it was wrong.
Did you see any tensions build in the community after those actions? Immediately, was tensions high across?
I think they was high.
Lines?
I think they was high. They drew lines in the racial sand, and everybody started talking about most of the blacks. And then what old blacker newspaper done? All the whites that wanted to be to state that it was wrong, they would not print what they said. They were making everybody think that all the people that was Caucasian thought that it was right. And then one lady came to the city council and said, I did not think it was right. A lot of whites did come and speak out in behalf of what I'd done. But guess what? Even as all of that flag never went back in the cemetery again. So we got something accomplished.
Yes, sir.
They fuss, but I go over there all the time, and I said, if I catch them over there again, I'll do the same thing. I have never caught those flags over there again. Because you know what? They knew that I was right. But guess who was on my side? The Justice Department called me.
Okay.
And they came down here. And we met in secret meetings. And guess who was on my side? The Southern Property, in Montgomery, what it is? Southern Property. You know what I'm talking about?
I do, yes, sir.
They came and they met with me.
So you had support at the national level for your
Yes.
actions here in Auburn during this
Yeah.
2010's Confederate flag thing in the cemetery here in Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about, like, maybe after this, you know, because this was very recently. You were active city councilman from 1994 to 2015. And then after this happened with the Confederate flags, you're still city councilman. Were there any tensions between you and the other city council members? Did you experience any type of discrimination?
The mayor had somebody to call me and say, why don't you let the judge just give you a fine for that? I said, no. So I will not let the city judge give me a fine when I'm his superior. And I know that I'm right. I said it was wrong for them to have that flag. I said, I tell you what I say I'm sorry about. I said, I tell them that I'm sorry that if I hurt you, daughters of the Confederacy, because that was never my intent. But let me tell you why, and I showed them pictures under that same flag that they hung me in black with their hands behind their backs. Under the same flag, they grabbed our women and raped them and had babies by them. And when their skin was light-skinned, they put those slaves in the houses, and the dark-skinned slaves out in the fields. They burned our houses under that flag. They killed our women and our men under that flag. I'm not sorry for moving the flag, but I'm sorry that you think that I hurt you. And the paper said, Dowdell apologized for moving that flag. I said, no, I didn't. Before I become a slave, I'll be resting in my grave. I grew up fighting for what I believe is right. And I'm not all the way black. And there is really, truly not all the way, nobody all the way black or white. But the thing is that we got to stand up for something or fall for anything. I chose to stand up. And I have stood up in this county more than any black, including Reverend Bannon, John Andrew, them put together. Here is the computer. I'll let you go on and see if anybody stood up more than me. Fighting not just for black folk, but when the police killed that girl that was mentally disturbed, she came running up in Macon County with a knife, little old knife. They could have hit her with a taser. Instead, they shot her. We stayed out there on the street marching against that. That was wrong. I don't see color, I see character. But when you're civil rights activist and you're fighting, most of the time you're fighting is for blacks. Look at what's going on over Northwest Auburn now. They moving all the Mexicans. I got one across the street from me. I like him. I don't have nothing against him. But at the same time, when I go over there on the other street, you got little shotgun houses that you building for blacks. And they got little rooms, not big as my kitchen. Look how big this is. And they got little rooms. They making rooms, the 2 rooms, not big as my kitchen. And those people have to suffice that. These are the kind of things that I get upset about as a civil rights leader. And when I was on the city council, or when I was the president, and still the unofficial president of the CLC, I fight for what's right. And John Andrew Harris, Reverend Bannon, has gone on to glory, I guess. But I'm still here for a reason. God kept me here. I don't look like I'm 69 years old. But God will keep you if you let him. So I'm happy to be, I'm not running for the city council. Again, I've served my time as a city council. Bill Ham, myself, most of the city councilmen that are on the city council now, they were freshmen when we was there. So, I look at them, they don't really know. I like Anders, but when I was on the city council, he was just coming on. Now he's the mayor of Auburn. Bill Ham was the best mayor that we ever had compared to Jan Dempsey. She was the old school mayor. Bill Ham was one of the greatest, will be one of the greatest mayors that we've had, because he understood what it was, because his daddy had washers and he mixed and mingled and grew up with black kids. So they sort of like he knew what it was because he could taste it when he come and play in our community. And then go back home to his community. He realized that there's a difference between the flavor here than when I had to come down in the lower black community and play. So I'm still living and still to fight for another day.
What is your as a current member of the NAACP here at Lee County branch, correct?
Mhm.
What are your hopes for the NAACP moving forward?
My hope for the NAACP that they would look at what the Supreme Court has said to Alabama, that you gotta have two districts. And even with the Supreme Court making the rulings, those racists and hardcore people did not even want to do it because, not because it was right, it was because they seen black people by the color of their skin and not by the content of their character. And the Justice Department had a special person to draw those lines, the Supreme Court, and say, this is what we got to go. They was forced to do that. Now what the NAACP should do is take this to every county and say, this is what the Supreme Court said. Republicans, you need to change your wards like Auburn do. We got, 25% blacks living in Lee County, a metropolitan county found. How many blacks do we have on the county commission? One. Should we have two? I think so. If you got 20% or 27% blacks living in Lee County, it sort of favors what's in Alabama. Why is it that we only have one black on the city council? On the county commission. When if those lines was drawn, because the mayor told me Auburn has grown. There are more blacks living in Auburn now, but not in Ward 1. Okay, if they're not living in Ward 1, let's do Ward 1 and then Ward 2 somewhere else. And downsize the city council. 3 blacks, 3 whites and 2 blacks. Why is it that Auburn got to have so many city councils and you don't even have 60,000 people living in a city that is not metropolitan? But nobody, they're scared to say it. NAACP, this is your privy. And that's my thing to them when I do decide to go. This is your time right now to make a change.
Were you ever, I know we're running probably short on the time, but were you ever part of any movements before 1981 with the NAACP, either pre or post?
No, I was too young. The thing was that I went in the army in 1973. Mm-hmm. I stayed 3 years and I got out in 76. When I got out, I was going through a rigmarole with my first marriage, and I went back to Detroit as a grown person. We got a house in Detroit. Then I realized I had children here. I better come back. My mother got sick. That's what drew me back. My mother had not got sick, I wouldn't have been as well known as I am now. But I came back to see about her, and boom, God had a plan for me. And that's how all of this got started.
Reverend Dowdell, I think I've kind of hit my questions, but I want to give you an open floor if there's anything. And I know that once we leave, we'll probably remember some questions or something that we want to say, and we can always touch base again to do a follow-up.
Okay.
But are there any closing ideas or comments or anything that you want to speak about that I haven't asked you?
My dream. I have a dream that as I grow older, that Ward 1 would have swimming pools. I have a dream that this city would rise up and realize that we, like Dr. King says, we went to the bank and the check that you gave us was voided. Housing, affordable housing, jobs that pays a fair wage. I have a dream that one day this neighborhood that blacks sweat and gave their lives for would be developed where every family could live and get their fair share of the American dream that every white person has. I think that when we say in God we trust, one nation under God, when you look around in War I in the city of Auburn, what do you see? I fought Auburn University. Dr. Muse and changed the facility workers over there. Dr. Muse met with us over at the conference center over there. And when I walked in, he had everything set up around this long table. I was young, afraid, frightened, praying. What am I going to say to these people? We got the job done. It changed. Auburn University now has less black students, that's my dream, than they had 20 years ago. They only have 7% blacks going to school at Auburn University. Now, folks get mad at me when I say this, but when you see the ball games and the basketball teams, oh my God, you would think that we balance. But those guys are playing because they know that in order to get to their dream, Auburn University is one of the pipelines to the NFL. So they play with grieving, knowing that something is amiss when the majority of the teams in America are 70% black. But when you go back to their hometowns, it doesn't look like that in the majority of them. So that's my dream, is that this war would be built up and that Auburn University would change. And that one day, I go downtown all the time. I see all those white students. And every now and then I see. And you go down to the stores. Look at all these stores downtown. Blacks that don't shop down there because they feel intimidated. We need to change. And all the years that I got left, that's what I'm going to be fighting for. I'm not through fighting yet. I'm just getting started at 69 years old. You'll see. The fight with me is just getting started. Because Jesus on his way back, I got to go ahead and do my last fighting because I know he's coming.
Reverend Dowdell, thank you so much
You're welcome,
for
sir.
your time. I just want to clarify once again, I have your permission to record
You really
this
does. And you have it to do whatever you want to do with it.
And thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.